I discovered my daughter's orthodontist was sexually assaulting patients under sedation, and because he's the mayor's brother, the police refused to investigate. So I built my own case from scratch. The recording lasted 43 seconds. That's all it took to destroy everything I thought I knew about my daughter's life for the past 18 months. I sat in my truck outside the orthodontist's office, my phone pressed against my ear, listening to the audio file that a stranger had anonymously sent to my work email. The voice was unmistakably Dr. Randall Whitmore, the man who had been adjusting my 15-year-old daughter's braces every 6 weeks since she was 13. The words he spoke made my vision blur, and my hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "She won't remember anything," he said to someone off mic, his voice casual like he was discussing the weather. "The propofol makes sure of that. Hand me the camera." I played it again, then a third time. My stomach lurched, and I barely got the door open before I vomited onto the asphalt of the parking lot. 3 cars down, a woman loading groceries into her Subaru stared at me with concern. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at anyone. Because in that moment, I understood that the man who had smiled at me in waiting rooms, who had shaken my hand and called my daughter a trooper after every appointment, was a predator hiding behind a white coat and a family name that owned this town. My name is David Reyes, and for 12 years I worked as a quality assurance manager at Brennan Industrial Supply, the largest employer in Crestwood, a suburb of about 90,000 people just north of the state capital. My wife Catherine and I moved here in 2011 because the schools were good, the crime rate was low, and it seemed like the kind of place where you could raise children without constantly looking over your shoulder. We had 2 kids, my son Nathan, who was 19 and away at college studying engineering, and my daughter Lily, who had just started her sophomore year of high school. Life was ordinary in the best possible way. We went to church on Sundays, had barbecues with the neighbors, and spent our summers camping at the state park 40 miles north. I coached Nathan's little league team until he aged out, and I never missed one of Lily's piano recitals. When Dr. Whitmore's office was recommended to us by Lily's pediatric dentist, I didn't think twice. The Whitmore family had been in Crestwood for 3 generations. Randall's older brother Gregory was serving his 2nd term as mayor, and their father had been a county judge before retiring. They donated to every charity, sponsored the 4th of July fireworks, and had their name on the new wing of the Children's Hospital. In a town like this, a name like Whitmore meant something. It meant trust. It meant respectability. It meant that when you handed your child over for a routine procedure, you never imagined you were delivering her into the hands of a monster. The first red flag appeared 8 months before I received that recording, but I was too blind to see it for what it was. Lily came home from a routine adjustment appointment complaining of a headache and mild nausea. Catherine thought it was just the stress of having her braces tightened, maybe combined with the anxiety she always felt before appointments. But something in Lily's eyes seemed different that evening, a kind of distant fog that I attributed to teenage moodiness. She went to bed early without eating dinner, which was unusual for her. The next morning she seemed fine, chattering about a group project for her biology class, and I forgot about the incident entirely. Then it happened again 2 months later, after another appointment. This time she said she felt weird, but couldn't explain what she meant. "It's like I was there, but I wasn't there," she told Catherine while I listened from the hallway. "Like I was watching myself from far away." Catherine scheduled a follow-up with her pediatrician, who ran some blood tests and found nothing abnormal. The doctor suggested it might be anxiety and recommended we consider therapy if the symptoms persisted. We scheduled an appointment with a counselor, but canceled it when Lily seemed to return to her normal self within a few days. I wish I had pushed harder. I wish I had asked more questions. But I trusted the process. I trusted the professionals. And I trusted the name on the door of that orthodontic practice. The anonymous email arrived on a Thursday morning in September. I was sitting at my desk reviewing a supplier audit report when my computer dinged with a new message. The subject line read, "Listen to this about Whitmore." There was no text in the body of the email, just an audio file attachment labeled office_recording_August14th.mp3. My first instinct was to delete it as spam or some kind of phishing attempt, but something made me click. Maybe it was the specificity of the subject line, or maybe some part of my subconscious already knew that something was wrong. The recording was grainy, clearly captured on a phone or cheap device hidden somewhere in a room. I heard shuffling, the beep of medical equipment, and then voices. Dr. Whitmore's voice was unmistakable because of his slight Boston accent that he'd never quite lost despite living in the Midwest for 20 years. He was talking to someone, probably an assistant, about a patient being under. Then came the words that would rewrite my entire understanding of my daughter's life. "She won't remember anything. The propofol makes sure of that. Hand me the camera." There was more after that. Sounds I refuse to describe because they live in my nightmares, and I won't give them more real estate by putting them into words. The recording ended abruptly with a door opening and footsteps. I sat at my desk for what felt like hours but was probably 10 minutes, my coffee growing cold, my audit report forgotten. Then I grabbed my keys, told my supervisor I had a family emergency, and drove to the parking lot where I threw up my breakfast. My first call was to the Crestwood Police Department. I asked to speak with a detective and was transferred to a man named Lieutenant Frank Olson, who had been with the department for 22 years, according to the plaque I would later see on his desk. I told him I had evidence of potential sexual assault involving a local medical professional and minor patients. His tone shifted immediately from bored to alert, and he asked me to come in to file a formal report. I drove straight to the station, the audio file saved to my phone and backed up to my cloud storage because even in my shock, I knew that evidence needed to be preserved. Olson was a heavy-set man in his early 50s with graying temples and the kind of tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too much over his career. He listened to the recording twice, his expression unreadable, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When it finished the second time, he leaned back in his chair and asked me a question that should have warned me about what was coming. "Do you know who Randall Whitmore is?" he said. "Do you know who his family is?" I told him I didn't care if his brother was the mayor or if his father had been the pope. What mattered was what was on that recording. Olson nodded slowly, like a man agreeing to something he knew was futile. He said he would need to verify the recording's authenticity, interview potential witnesses, and consult with the district attorney's office. He told me not to contact Dr. Whitmore or discuss the situation with anyone. He told me they would be in touch. Then he shook my hand, and I walked out of that station believing that the system would protect my daughter. I was wrong. 3 weeks passed with no contact from the police. I called Lieutenant Olson's office 11 times and was told he was unavailable, in a meeting, or on another case. On my 12th attempt, I finally got through. His voice was different now, guarded and formal. He informed me that after a preliminary investigation, the department had determined there was insufficient evidence to proceed with a formal inquiry. The audio recording, he explained, could not be authenticated without the original device, and the anonymous source made it legally problematic. When I demanded to know what investigation had been conducted, he became evasive. Had they interviewed the staff? He couldn't discuss ongoing personnel matters. Had they checked Whitmore's medical records for sedation protocols? That would require a warrant they didn't have probable cause to obtain. Had they spoken to other patients or families? Privacy laws prevented random contact. I felt the blood rushing to my face as I realized what was happening. "This is because of his brother," I said. "The mayor got to you." Olson's silence told me everything I needed to know. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost apologetic. "Mr. Reyes, I'm going to give you some advice off the record. Let this go. You don't want to make an enemy of the Whitmore family. They have resources you can't imagine. Find another orthodontist for your daughter and move on with your life." I hung up without saying goodbye. I couldn't tell Catherine yet. I couldn't tell anyone. The weight of what I suspected was crushing me, but I needed more than suspicion before I could destroy my family's sense of safety with the truth. That night, I sat in my home office until 3 a.m, researching everything I could find about propofol, sedation dentistry, and sexual assault in medical settings. What I learned made my blood run cold. Propofol, the drug Whitmore had mentioned on the recording, was a powerful anesthetic that caused both unconsciousness and amnesia. Patients typically had no memory of anything that occurred while under its effects. It was the same drug that had killed Michael Jackson, and it was commonly used in dental and orthodontic procedures requiring sedation. According to the State Medical Board database, Whitmore was licensed to administer sedation for complex procedures. His practice website advertised comfort sedation as an option for patients with dental anxiety. I pulled up Lily's medical records from the patient portal and felt my stomach drop when I saw the notation. Mild sedation administered for bracket adjustment. Patient preference. I had never authorized sedation. Catherine had never authorized sedation. And Lily, when I asked her the next morning in the most casual voice I could muster, said she couldn't remember ever being sedated. "They just give me the numbing stuff," she said, confused by my question. "Why?" I told her I was just reviewing our insurance claims and changed the subject. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer a concerned parent. I was a man on a mission. The first person I reached out to was Dr. Patricia Nguyen, a forensic psychiatrist I found through a victims advocacy organization based in the state capital. She had spent 18 years specializing in cases of medical professional misconduct and had testified as an expert witness in over 60 trials. When I explained the situation over the phone, including the recording, the police response, and my daughter's unexplained symptoms, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that gave me my first real hope. "This pattern is not uncommon," she told me. "Predators in medical settings often target patients who are sedated because the drugs provide both access and amnesia. The symptoms your daughter described, the foggy feeling, the sense of watching herself from outside, those are consistent with propofol-induced dissociative effects. Some patients have fragments of memory that feel dreamlike and unreal." She agreed to consult on the case pro bono if I could gather more evidence. She also connected me with an attorney named Margaret Sullivan, a former prosecutor who now ran a small civil rights practice specializing in institutional abuse cases. Margaret had a reputation for being relentless, which was exactly what I needed. Our first meeting was at a coffee shop 30 miles from Crestwood because she insisted on discretion. When I played her the recording, her jaw tightened. "This is prosecutable," she said. "The problem isn't the evidence. The problem is getting anyone in this county to touch a Whitmore." But her eyes had a spark of challenge in them. "Fortunately, I don't live in this county, and I've handled worse. Building a case from scratch meant becoming someone I'd never been before. I was a quality assurance manager, trained to follow procedures and document everything. Now I had to apply those skills to something far more dangerous. Margaret helped me understand what we needed: corroborating witnesses, medical records showing unauthorized sedation, financial records proving insurance fraud, and ideally other victims willing to come forward. The audio recording was powerful, but legally shaky without provenance. We needed to build a mountain of evidence so high that no political connection could bury it. My first task was to find other victims. Margaret warned me that direct contact could be seen as witness tampering if we weren't careful, so we developed a strategy. I created an anonymous email account and began posting carefully worded messages on local parenting forums, neighborhood apps, and social media groups. Has anyone had concerning experiences at Whitmore Orthodontics? Please reach out. You are not alone. The responses came slowly at first, then in a flood. Within 2 weeks, I had received 43 messages from parents and former patients. Many were expressing general dissatisfaction, complaints about billing or wait times, but 12 of them described something darker: children who came home from appointments feeling disoriented, dizzy, or not themselves. 3 described their daughters being unusually emotional or withdrawn after visits, and 2, just 2, described daughters who had confided in them about weird dreams that felt like memories. I forwarded everything to Margaret, who began the delicate process of reaching out to these families through proper legal channels. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A woman named Rebecca Ashford contacted me through the anonymous email with a message that made my hands shake as I read it. Her daughter Madison, now 19, had been a patient of Whitmore's from ages 14 to 17. For years, Madison had experienced what she called lost time during appointments, fragments of memory that didn't make sense, and a deep unease about the orthodontist that she couldn't explain. Last year, Madison had begun therapy for unrelated anxiety issues, and during EMDR treatment, she had recovered memories that devastated her. She remembered being touched. She remembered a camera. She remembered Whitmore's voice saying things she had tried for years to forget. Rebecca and Madison had gone to the police 8 months ago, before my anonymous recording ever existed. Lieutenant Olson had taken their statement, promised an investigation, and then gone silent. When Rebecca called to follow up, she was told there was no evidence to proceed. Sound familiar? Rebecca was willing to testify. Madison was willing to testify. They had documentation of their police report, their medical records, and their therapist's clinical notes. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. Margaret Sullivan filed a civil lawsuit against Dr. Randall Whitmore, Whitmore Orthodontics LLC, and 3 unnamed staff members in state court, bypassing the local county system entirely. The suit alleged sexual assault, medical malpractice, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress on behalf of Madison Ashford and 4 other Jane Doe plaintiffs whose families had agreed to join the case. Lily was not yet named because Catherine still didn't know the full extent of what I suspected, and I couldn't add that burden to our daughter without her mother's support. The lawsuit landed like a bomb in Crestwood. The local newspaper, which was largely funded by advertising from Whitmore family businesses, ran a small story on page 6 mentioning the allegations and quoting a spokesperson for Dr. Whitmore calling the claims baseless and defamatory. But the state capital's newspaper picked up the story with more vigor, and within days, a reporter named Diane Mercer from the CBS affiliate reached out to Margaret asking for an interview. Diane had won an Emmy for her investigative work on nursing home abuse 3 years earlier, and she was exactly the kind of journalist who could shine a light into the corners that powerful people wanted to keep dark. Margaret arranged a meeting, and I sat across from Diane in her office, telling her everything I knew and everything I suspected. She listened without interrupting, her recorder running the entire time. When I finished, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I've been hearing rumors about Randall Whitmore for years," she said. "But no one would ever go on record. They were too scared of his family." She paused. "Are you scared, Mr. Reyes?" I told her the truth. I was terrified, but I was more terrified of what would happen if I did nothing. The night I finally told Catherine was the hardest conversation of my life. We sat in our bedroom with the door locked, our voices low so Lily wouldn't hear us from down the hall. I showed her the recording. I showed her the medical records with the unauthorized sedation notations. I showed her the messages from other parents and the lawsuit filings. She listened in silence, tears streaming down her face, her hands gripping the bedsheet so hard I thought they might tear. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. Then she got up, walked to the bathroom, and threw up. I stood outside the door, listening to her sobs, feeling utterly helpless. When she finally emerged, her eyes were red, but her jaw was set with the determination I recognized from 20 years of marriage. "We're going to destroy him," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a promise. That night we lay in bed without sleeping, holding each other, trying to figure out how to protect our daughter while also fighting for justice. We agreed that we would tell Lily the basics, that there were concerns about Dr. Whitmore's conduct, that she would never return to that office, and that she might need to talk to someone professional about her experiences. We would not show her the recording or burden her with the full weight of what we suspected. She was 15. She deserved to hold on to whatever innocence remained. The retaliation began within days of the lawsuit being filed. My supervisor at Brennan Industrial called me into his office on a Wednesday afternoon and informed me that my position was being eliminated due to restructuring. 12 years of exemplary performance reviews, and suddenly I was redundant. I didn't need to ask why. Brennan Industrial had received a major contract from Whitmore Construction 3 years ago, and the families were close. I was given 2 weeks severance and escorted from the building by security, my personal items packed into a cardboard box like I was some kind of criminal. Catherine's real estate firm also began experiencing problems. Open houses that should have drawn crowds sat empty. Clients canceled consultations without explanation. Her broker, a man she had considered a friend for 8 years, called her into his office and suggested she might want to take some time off until the situation resolved itself. We were being systematically cut off from our livelihood, our community, and our support network. But what they didn't understand was that we had nothing left to lose. We had already lost the only thing that mattered, our daughter's safety. Everything else was just money and status, and those could be rebuilt. Justice could not wait. Diane Mercer's investigation aired on a Thursday evening in November, a 20-minute segment during the 6 o'clock news that was promoted heavily throughout the day. She had obtained the anonymous recording through legal discovery after Margaret subpoenaed it as evidence. She had interviewed Rebecca and Madison Ashford, their faces obscured and voices altered for protection. She had found a former dental assistant named Crystal Bowman, who had worked for Whitmore 5 years ago and quit after witnessing inappropriate behavior that she had reported to the office manager with no response. Crystal was now willing to speak on camera, her voice shaking but steady, describing how Whitmore would dismiss staff during certain procedures and how she had once walked in to find him standing too close to a sedated teenage patient. The segment also featured Dr. Patricia Nguyen explaining the psychology of predators in medical settings and a former prosecutor discussing how political connections could derail legitimate investigations. Diane had requested an interview with Lieutenant Olson, who declined. She requested comment from Mayor Gregory Whitmore, who also declined. She requested a statement from Dr. Randall Whitmore's attorney, who called the allegations a coordinated smear campaign by disgruntled patients and their greedy lawyers. The segment ended with Diane looking directly into the camera, asking viewers to contact her station if they had any information about similar experiences. Within 48 hours, her station had received over 200 calls. 38 of them were from families describing the exact same pattern we had uncovered. The walls began closing in on Randall Whitmore from every direction. The state medical board announced an emergency review of his license following the broadcast, requiring him to cease all patient contact pending investigation. The state attorney general's office, which had jurisdiction beyond the local police, opened a criminal inquiry after receiving a referral from a coalition of victims' attorneys, including Margaret Sullivan. A federal investigation was also rumored after one victim's family filed a complaint with the FBI alleging civil rights violations. Most significantly, one of Whitmore's own staff members came forward. Her name was Denise Crawford, and she had been his head orthodontic technician for 11 years. Denise had suspected something was wrong for most of that time, but had convinced herself she was imagining things. The broadcast broke something open in her, she later said, a dam of denial that had been holding back years of guilt and complicity. She walked into the state attorney general's office with a thumb drive containing security camera footage from the office that she had secretly copied before it could be deleted. The footage showed Whitmore entering treatment rooms alone with sedated patients after dismissing his staff. It showed him adjusting cameras in ways that were inconsistent with standard medical documentation. It showed him doing things that I will not describe because they make me physically ill to remember. The footage covered a period of 3 years and implicated at least 22 victims, most of whom had no idea what had been done to them. The arrest happened on a Sunday morning, 2 days before Thanksgiving. I know because I was watching from across the street when the state police cruisers pulled up to Randall Whitmore's gated home in the nicest neighborhood in Crestwood. I had been there since dawn, parked in my truck with a thermos of coffee, unable to stay away from the moment I had been working toward for 3 months. 4 officers approached the front door while 2 more covered the back. The door opened, and I saw him for the first time since this nightmare began. Dr. Randall Whitmore, 52 years old, silver-haired and distinguished-looking in his bathrobe and slippers, his face a mask of disbelief as the officers read him his rights. He was handcuffed in his own driveway while his wife stood in the doorway screaming at the officers that they were making a mistake, that her husband was a respected member of the community, that his brother would hear about this. I watched as they placed him in the back of a cruiser, his head ducked to avoid the door frame, his eyes searching the street as if looking for someone who might save him. For one brief moment, his gaze passed over my truck. I don't know if he recognized me. I don't know if he had any idea that I was the one who had started this avalanche. But I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to the man who had hurt my daughter and so many others. It was the smallest possible gesture of victory, and it tasted like ash and relief in equal measure. The charges were extensive: 26 counts of sexual assault, 18 counts of sexual exploitation of minors, 31 counts of insurance fraud, and multiple counts of administering controlled substances without informed consent. The prosecution estimated that Whitmore had victimized over 100 patients during his 23-year career, though many would never know what had happened to them due to the amnesiac effects of the sedation drugs. The evidence was overwhelming. In addition to the security footage, investigators found encrypted hard drives in Whitmore's home containing thousands of images and videos that I will not describe except to say that they were enough to guarantee he would never see the outside of a prison again. The trial took place 8 months later in the state capitol, moved from Crestwood due to the impossibility of finding an impartial jury. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Catherine, watching as witness after witness took the stand to describe what had been done to them or their children. Lily did not testify. We had decided as a family that her healing was more important than her participation in the trial, and the prosecution had more than enough evidence without her. But she was there on the final day, sitting between me and Catherine, when the jury returned their verdict after less than 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Randall Whitmore was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, plus an additional 60 years, ensuring he would die in prison. The judge, a 71-year-old woman named Honorable Ruth Blackwood, who had presided over the bench for 33 years, delivered a statement at sentencing that I will never forget. "You used your position of trust to prey upon the most vulnerable members of our community," she said, her voice cold with barely contained fury. "You exploited the faith that families placed in you when they entrusted you with their children's care. You violated not only their bodies but their minds, stealing memories they didn't even know they had lost. And you did all of this while hiding behind a family name that you believed would protect you from consequences." She paused, looking directly at Whitmore, who sat slumped at the defense table like a deflated balloon. "That name cannot protect you now. Nothing can protect you now." The sentencing also included implications for others who had enabled Whitmore's crimes. Lieutenant Frank Olson was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into his handling of earlier complaints. He ultimately resigned rather than face a disciplinary hearing and lost his pension. The office manager who had ignored Crystal Bowman's reports was charged with obstruction and received 2 years probation. And Mayor Gregory Whitmore, though never charged with any crime, announced he would not seek re-election, citing family health concerns. He moved out of state within the year. The civil settlements came next. Margaret Sullivan negotiated a comprehensive package on behalf of all identified victims, funded by Whitmore's personal assets, his malpractice insurance, and a confidential contribution from the Whitmore Family Trust that we suspected was meant to prevent further revelations about what other family members might have known. Each victim received compensation that, while it could never undo the harm done to them, would provide financial security and access to long-term therapeutic care. Lily's settlement was placed in a trust that she will access when she turns 25, though we've tried to shield her from thinking about the money at all. What matters more to us is that she's healing. She sees Dr. Patricia Nguyen once a week, and while the journey has been difficult, she's shown incredible resilience. Last month, she told Catherine that she was thinking about becoming a therapist herself someday to help other kids who had been through hard things. Catherine cried for an hour after that conversation, but they were good tears for once. Tears of pride and hope instead of grief and rage. It's been 18 months since Randall Whitmore was sentenced. We still live in Crestwood, though we've thought about moving more times than I can count. But running away felt like letting them win, like admitting that the Whitmore family's shadow still loomed over us. Instead, we've stayed and rebuilt. I started my own quality assurance consulting firm, working remotely with clients across the country who don't care about small-town politics or powerful families. Catherine found a position with a real estate company in the next county over, one that values her skills and doesn't ask questions about her past. Lily will graduate high school next year with honors, and she's already looking at colleges on the East Coast where she can start fresh as just another student instead of that girl from the Whitmore case. Nathan came home for Christmas and told us he was proud of what we did, proud of how we fought when everyone told us to give up. That meant more to me than I can express. The hardest part of this whole experience wasn't the investigation or the trial or even the retaliation we faced from people we thought were friends. The hardest part was learning to live with the knowledge of what had been done to my daughter while I stood by trusting the wrong people. There are nights when I lie awake at 3 a.m, running through every appointment, every handshake, every time I smiled at that man and thanked him for taking such good care of Lily's teeth. The guilt doesn't go away just because justice was served. It lives in me now, a permanent resident in my chest that reminds me to never again trust a title or a name or a reputation over my own instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. And when the system fails to protect the people you love, sometimes you have to become the system yourself. I think about the person who sent me that anonymous recording, the one that started everything. I never found out who they were. Margaret suspects it was Denise Crawford, laying the groundwork for her eventual decision to come forward with the security footage. Others think it might have been a family member or even a victim who somehow recovered their memories. Whoever it was, they changed my life and the lives of over 100 other families who would never have known the truth without their courage. If you're reading this anonymous source, I want you to know that what you did mattered. You gave me the weapon I needed to fight back, and I used it to burn down everything that man had built. You are a hero, even if no one ever knows your name. To everyone who made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I know it wasn't easy to hear, just like it wasn't easy to live. But if there's one thing I've learned from this nightmare, it's that silence protects predators and exposure destroys them. If you suspect something is wrong with someone in authority, trust yourself. Document everything. Find allies. And never, ever assume that powerful people are too powerful to face consequences. They want you to believe that because your surrender is what keeps them safe. Don't give it to them. Fight. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.